science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and the awe of a flower.
Evidence is evidence. It's public. Everybody can look at the evidence and assess it, and eventually, if there's enough evidence, come to the same conclusion.
Cockatoos with attitude. Cockatude.
Welcome to Cockatude. A couple of points before you see the main video. In this video, you will notice that I am petting Cecil all the way down his back and fairly regularly. This is a big no-no when working with birds, because if they develop mate territoriality with you, then you have aggression and other issues. That's where a lot of people get bit, or their friends get bit. But every bird is a study of one. If you'll notice with Cecil, and pay attention to this, he never fans his tail feathers. He never tries to get on my arm and do what the males generally do. He doesn't show any of the signs of a bird that's being stimulated. Now, he's got some friends, some human friends that come over that have never petted him that way, and he will immediately go into those behaviors with them. For some reason with me, he doesn't do that. Hi, and welcome to Cockatude, Cockatoos with Attitude. My name is Don Scott. I'm the Executive Director and Primary Trainer for the Chloe Sanctuary for Parrots and Cockatoos. And this guy right here, who's just as antsy as you can get, but he's about as cute as you can get, is Babalu. He's a greater sulfur-crested cockatoo. They're native of Australia, and they're forbidden to be transported out of there. He was grown here in the United States, bred here, and we're going to talk about him today. This is the second in our podcasts dealing with each of the birds at our sanctuary and their history, their problems, the things they've surmounted, the issues they still have to go through. And this one here is Cecil. And that's, of course, Peaches sitting there. Also in the room, out of view, we have Sal, who's a 4-year-old Moluccan. And we have Sugar, who's, we don't know how old she is, but she seems to be a wild caught, older wild caught, because of the issue in her eyes. She has the milkiness that happens over time, so she's probably 40 years old. With any luck, she's still got 40 in her. But Sugar's in here with us. And I had a couple of others I was going to bring, but they wanted to eat the cameras today, so it's hard enough to keep track of them without having to deal with somebody trying to eat them. Bob, come back here for a second. Come here, Bob. Come on. Come see me. So Babalu is 15 years old, and he was rehomed 8 times in the first 11 years of his life. And for that reason, since these birds mate for life, the idea that he had possibly bonded with 4 or 5 of those places, I don't know how long he was in each of those homes, but he possibly bonded with them, and then to have that bond broken caused some pretty severe psychological issues. When he was brought in, his weight was normal. His behavior was what people would term aggressive. And you can see how aggressive he is now. He just likes to play a lot. So he's sitting over here on the side just playing. Do you want a piece of wood, Bob? A piece of wood? Does that make you feel good? How about one of these? Tongue depressor? Nope. He was healthy when we brought him in. He was being kept at Mission Animal and Bird Hospital in Oceanside at their old facility. They moved into a larger facility and a better facility since then. But they were doing a great job trying to rehome him. But that brings up the other issue. Rehoming these guys is much like, that's his shirt. You don't have to eat it. Cecil. say you had a raccoon rescue. You wouldn't try to make them acclimate to a new home environment because they're wild animals. In captivity, they don't do terribly well. They're not domesticated. And all those things apply to these guys. They're meant to be flying in the sky. They're not. Hi, Cecil. This is not about you, Cecil, but you're welcome to come up here, you silly bird. And that's an issue we found, is we used to actually do that part of the business too. As a nonprofit, we would bring in birds and heal them and try to put them in homes. But what we found is that they're just unable to deal with the fact there's so much to learn to work with these guys. And so we have these birds that were raised by breeders. They didn't know that most of them never knew their parents. They were handled by people only. And they're put into homes. And as soon as they reach an age of adolescence, which usually they go through sexual maturity on these larger birds at about 3.5 years and become full adults at 5. And they would come out of their, what we would call teenage years, about 5 years later. So in that time, since they're highly sensitive to their environment and they're trying to find a mate, it can be extremely difficult for someone to actually work with them. And they'll start screaming. Screaming is defined as repetitively making a squawk anywhere from 1 to 2 seconds apart. And since their voices are anywhere from anywhere from 100 decibels to 125, that would drive people crazy. One of the things that Bob says, Bob, are you ever going to come out of there? Nah. One of the things that Bob says, Bob would say, and I hope this doesn't upset him, but he used to say, "Make it stop," like that. It kind of sounded like The Exorcist. And he would scream, "Make it stop," and you can imagine the situation where he's screaming and somebody's yelling just yelling insanely, "Make it stop." Someone couldn't handle that sound, and he picked up their behavior because it was so dramatic. They do tend to pick up dramatic behaviors. He also picked up some other behaviors. What we noticed on his behavior, his health was fine. His weight was good. His eyes were clear. He didn't have any further destructive behavior. All the other signs you look for health were there, and he went through his initial physicals with no issues. But behaviorally, the first time I met him, he turned his beak to me and lunged forward. To which I naturally did what I normally do, which is I put my arm right up to his beak. And he turned away. Now, I'm not going to say the same thing is going to happen for you, because birds have unique vision. They see into the ultraviolet. So if you can imagine someone that can tell whether or not you are having whether your skin is flushed because you're afraid, they can read your skin and interpret what they see there. Now, how they interpret it, we can't read minds, of course, but it seems that with Bob, he didn't take it as a bluff. He knew I wouldn't care if he bit me. Again, that's all conjecture. But whatever happened, it wasn't the behavior he normally got, which is for someone to pull their arm away. Instead, he got the opposite behavior, and he turned his head away. And that was the beginning of that relationship. And I used to come visit him before he ended up staying at the sanctuary. At the time, we were in a small facility, and you can't get much smaller than an apartment. And that's how we started out. And I was trying to figure out how to soundproof the area so I could bring him in because he was so loud. And after that, he never actually performed that same behavior with me. He didn't open his beak and lunge forward. Now, he was in a facility where, of course, they had a lot of other things to do. So they'd have him sitting outside, and then they would walk by his cage to go get a dog to walk. And then they'd walk by. So most of the time, even vet techs and people who work at veterinary hospitals are not savvy about birds. So what they will do is they will go walk by his cage, go get a dog, walk it, and then walk by it, not say anything to him or any of the other birds, ignore them, basically. Well, with Bob, that became an issue. And when I finally got him to the sanctuary, what I had to do was, walk by him to get to other birds, and he'd be sitting out. And when I would walk by him, he would reach out and bite me. So for the first couple of days, as I was analyzing his behavior, I noted that I was being bitten at those times where I walked by him. So I stopped that. I would walk up to him, I would talk to him, and get his attention, and then walk away, and that stopped the behavior. He stopped biting me. He could easily develop an attitude about being ignored and walked by. And what was lucky there is my first foray into solving the problem actually fixed it. It doesn't usually work that way. Since he had been rehomed so many times, it seemed likely that the best solution with him would be to allow him to bond to me. In most cases, you want to avoid that because if you get mate territoriality going, you have a big problem. Most birds, when they become mate territorial, will attack people in your environment, will bite you as a mode of telling you that you're breaking the social contract by your behavior. If you're paying someone else, a human or another bird, too much attention. They may also attack other birds because they're trying to protect their nesting area. So you don't want to do that. But in his case, I didn't see any other option since he had furtive looks. Whenever you came up to him, he would look this way and look that way. And then it was as if you could see the wheels turning inside, although I couldn't read them. It seemed to me that in order to make him a happy bird, he was going to have to know that I was going to be there for him. And at that point, I determined that he would stay with the sanctuary, and that's before we became solely a permanent sanctuary for birds. But, as you can see right now, he's showing a little bit of interest in Cecil. And what Cecil is doing, Cecil has a piece of wood, and Bob's going to go and try to take it away from him. And this is because it's a little bit of that territoriality. Another bird is doing something around me. Bob, come on, be nice. Because another bird is doing something around me, he's protecting me by trying to make sure that everything in this little territory is not bothered by other birds. He's getting pretty good about it. As you see right now, if you can see his face, which I think you can according to the camera angles, he just doesn't want Cecil sitting on me and chewing on a toy. He's restraining himself when he first came and he became bonded to me. He would turn around and bite me in these situations, and then he would fly into the other birds. And Bob, come on now, be calm. Be calm. It's all right. I love you, Bob. It's okay. It's okay, big boy. It's okay. Yeah, I know, it's tough. You don't like him being around me. Once he became bonded to me and was comfortable being around me, I spent about 2 weeks being torn up pretty well. I had lots of bites all over my body. Mainly in those times, actually almost exclusively in those times, where I was separating him from his attack on another bird. He never actually hurt another bird in these attacks, but he would lunge himself at them and, full beak, wings out, going for him, and I would put my hands immediately out and pull the birds apart. And you get a strong personality like Cecil and a strong personality like Bob going for each other. Cecil he hesitates attacking, but once he's upset and he's been pushed to the limit, then he's hard to control too. So it made for some tough times, but it only took a few weeks, and I was able to calm the situation down. And after that, nips here and there, but I never had to worry about blood being drawn again. Except for one time, which I'll mention. At that time, we had brought in another bird, Roman. And Roman I was told Roman didn't like men. This is something that I don't ever believe that. Birds are not tied to one sex or the other. It's a matter of their environment and whatever's happened in the past, and that can be changed. So Roman apparently had a problem with the beard because he would focus his eyes on it and run away, and so I shaved it off. Well, that was my first ear piercing, actually my only ear piercing by a bird. When Bob saw that change, he lunged at my face and he got my ear. So for the next few days, what I would do is I would let him out of the cage, and he would jump in my lap, and I would, here Bob, no, he won't do it. I would cover him up, and he would just sit with his head down between my legs. I know, that sounds like that sounds very masochistic of me. I mean, it could have been the end of my life. But I understood, at least in theory, that he was assuming I was a sick bird, and birds by nature will throw a sick bird out of the flock. When he wasn't looking at me, he wasn't showing any aggression at all. When he was looking at me, he'd look at my face, those eyes would focus on my face, the feathers on the back of the neck would go out, the heart shape would come out, and then he would lunge. And that's what happened every time. So then I'd put him back in the cage. 3 days of sitting like an Indian faker in front of his cage, taking him out, petting him, talking to him, and then he let it go. Well, almost all of it. Prior to that, I used to take showers with Bob. I still do, but I used to take showers with Bob, and it was never an issue. But he doesn't tolerate me taking off my glasses now. Before, it wasn't a problem. After this issue of shaving, he developed an issue with the glasses. Now, I could work through that with him, but I haven't chosen to because it's not a major issue. If I shower with him, Bob, it's all right, sweetheart. It's okay. He's just playing with the wood, sweetheart. It's all right. So now when I take a shower with Bob, I make sure I leave my glasses on. One time I forgot, and he was nervous about it, and he'd stare at me, but he didn't actually bite me. And he enjoyed his shower. He got in and put his wings up against my chest, as he usually does, put his head up under my neck and said, "Bob's a good boy. Bob's a good boy," which is his way. And then he said kisses, and made kissing sounds. So his major issues when we brought him in, he didn't show any health issues, but he did show these behavioral problems. They're called when you take applied behavior analysis, you learn to call them functional misbehaviors. And the reason you call them functional is because they serve a function in a bird's life. Like Bob's turning the beak and lunging. Well, if you were stuck in a cage all day long and only let out so they could clean your cage, you might try to extend that period that you could stay out. And if you were to discover that by making a certain motion with your head, the person would jump back, well, you've got a measure of control. And just like with us, we want a measure of control with our lives, and obviously Bob is trying to get this control with his life. So it seems fairly obvious that he was using that behavior to control those who took him out of the cage, so he could stay out longer. Using that as a functional analysis, it worked And I was able to lead him to choosing to change his own behavior. Now, he'll still do this with people, new people he meets. He was with I think a 10 or 11-year-old girl for a while. And she used to play with him, and they got along famously, and that was the last home he was in before he came to us. Well, when he meets somebody new, he will say, "Hi," in a real high voice. It sounds like a 10-year-old, 11-year-old girl. And he makes these sweet little sounds, and he tries to get people to pay attention to him. But once you start paying attention, and you show interest, then he doesn't want, it appears that he's going to do things to make it so that you don't stop giving him that attention. So there was one lady here who said, "Oh, I have no problem with birds." She was sitting in our socialization chair in the main bird room. "Oh, I have no problem with birds, and so I'll handle Bob." Well, that lasted about 5 minutes. And he ended up sitting on her stomach and giving her such a stare into her eyes, just staring her down, that she actually leaned her head back and said, "Could you please take him off of me?" He hadn't done anything to her. He hadn't nipped her. He hadn't, nothing. But he had used the head lunge to manipulate her hand. When she tried to pet him, he actually controlled the way she did it by the way he moved his head. And there you go, Cecil. Are you going to take off now? Are you going to take off? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? You're a good boy. You going to get into what he was doing now? That's another thing. See, he has to move into a position where someone else was in my territory, and he has to kind of put his stamp on it. There's no dominance in birds. That's been proven. If you look at the scientific research that's been done, there's no dominance. But there is territoriality. And Bob feels territorial about me because he's one of the birds I'm mated to. He's an incredible manipulator. You do get to the point where you realize they have the intelligence that science has said that they have, because in recent research they placed him somewhere in the kindergarten range, 5 or 6-year-old child. But if he gets noisy and he doesn't mind. Most of these birds don't mind if you yell. Yelling's not a problem because our voices are quieter than theirs. So what's yelling to them, right, Cecil? What's yelling to them? It's nothing really. But if he thinks that you're unhappy with him, again, I don't know this. This is the situation. I'll describe what I mean by that, because obviously I can't read his mind. If, let's say that when you go to take a bowl out of the cage next to him, he reaches out and grabs your arm, which he doesn't bite me when he does that, but if he reaches out and grabs my arm, and if I look at him and say, "Bob, don't do that," he might at that point say, Bob's a BAD, I can't say it, but a BAD bird. He'll say that, and I'll look at him and go, "No, Bob's a good boy." And then he'll repeat it, and I'll say, "No, Bob's a good boy." And this will go on for a while, and finally he'll go, "Bob's a good boy," with a question, which is the way he used to say it when he came here, to the way I taught him to say it, which is, "Bob's a good boy." And he gets that head bob going, and he gets that chest popped out, and he goes, "Bob's a good boy." And so I always try to leave it where his responses are positive like that. If he starts giving any negativity, any of the phrases he uses when he is, by his body motions, it appears that he's not happy. So I try to change that around to where he's positive. And that's something you need to do with every bird that's in your environment. You have to turn them around when they are obviously either pulling away from you or sitting with and not interested in the world, unless they're sleeping, of course, with their foot up. And that takes a bit of learning. You have to learn what different things are. Like the feathers come up on the back of the neck, that's usually aggression. If the feathers come up around the beak, that's generally just the opposite. As if you were concealing a weapon, so you're putting a weapon back in the sheath. There are a lot of different feather positions and ways that they turn their heads and the ways that they use their tongues. All these things, when you understand them, you can look at a bird and say, oh, they're going to sleep, or that bird's about ready to get up and do something. I better watch to see what they're going to get involved in. But anyway, Bob, his socialization with other birds was difficult at first. Most of these birds haven't been around their species, and he doesn't have any of his species around here. So dealing with the umbrellas and the Moluccans wasn't easy for him. He actually got along with a bird that we used to have, Murray, who was an African gray, better than almost any other bird in the place. But Murray just died of old age, and so he lost that friend. Although she would occasionally tell him off. He took over down here, and now he doesn't want Cecil coming back. He showed some signs of possibly aggressively trying to push Cecil out of here, and then started preening. So right now it could go either way. Cecil's back there just playing. Bob's sticking his nose. He doesn't have a nose, but he's sticking his face into the situation. So I'm keeping an eye on that too. But then his health took a turn. I noticed that he was having trouble passing solids. He was passing urates and urine. Urates are the milky, either yellowish or white discharge that comes out with their poop, and the feces is usually tubular and green. Well, what was happening with him is that it was becoming hard and just sticking in his vent. And I mean, it was hard enough where you could grab it and pull it out, but it took a little bit of a tug. So ended up going to Mission Animal Hospital, and they paid for some diagnostic work, which ruled out a whole bunch of possibilities with him. And then I went to Avian and Exotic Animal Hospital and saw Dr. Jenkins, and we actually looked inside of his cloaca using a type of speculum for birds. And the problem he has is that the peristaltic motion, the motion that moves poop through the channel, is incredibly weak. So maybe it's because he's been straining for a longer time than has been evidenced by when the problem became obvious. But he's using his gut muscles to help push his poop out. And so the solution was to give him lactulose, which helps to put liquid into the poop, and also to put him on a diet of mostly squash, and he gets everything else in there too, but the bulk of the additional stuff is squash, because squash tends to make everything soft coming out. And that helps. I mean, I rarely see him strain, but if you look at his poop over the day, you'll see that it starts out normal, and then slowly over the day it gets less and less liquid, and the poop is starting to become dry at the end. So what this means is he will probably prolapse. And the cloacal prolapse is when the internal organs actually fall out of the body and hang loose. When that happens, you have the danger of infection and death. And generally, birds that have a prolapse like that are going to die of infection. There are 6 separate operations, 3 of them on the outside of the body, and then 3 on the inside. So you work through that. You give them an operation when that happens, and then another, and then another, and then another, and finally they die. Lily at the Lily Sanctuary died of that very issue. So we're doing everything we can to keep him healthy and to keep his cloaca working normally. We also found that diet seems to be good for the other birds. We actually mix a rowdy bush nibbles, which are little tiny pellets. We soak them in water and then mix that into the blend of vegetables that they get, and that way they're getting all the nutrition from the pellets along with fresh fruits and vegetables. So they all get that now. And I've noticed that all the poop of all the birds seems much improved. So maybe the problem that we have in captive birds, where so many of them get prolapses, more males than females, if the statistics are true, is primarily due to diet. We do have a video on Bob's diet up there and on YouTube, and it's not that hard to make. I make it for 12 birds. It takes about 45 minutes every morning to make that diet for him. Bob gets the leftovers from the morning as well, and a couple of the other birds who just really don't want to eat pellets all the time. Most of the other birds are happy eating pellets at night, and it seems that they eat a little better if they don't get wet food twice a day. This one, Cecil, if you don't give him wet food, he doesn't eat the wet food much in the morning, but at night he devours it. So, each bird is a study of one, and in order to deal with them, you have to analyze their situation, and we'll talk about one bird that Coco had what appears to be, her crop was burned when she was being brought up by the breeder. That's not unusual. They give the food to them too hot, and it damages them for life. How's that going, Bob? Yeah, see, it's coming out, but it's not coming out quite as... it's not coming out quite right, is it, Bob? But at least it didn't get stuck in there. So that's, as far as health, that's an issue. He's doing really well with his socialization with other birds. And I really have to deal with Cecil. Bob, it's all right. It's all right. I know he had a toy against my head. I know. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, boy. Thank you. It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I used to tell him it was all right. There's no way he's going to listen to me. He'd shake his head at me, and then I'd shake my head at him, and we'd shake heads for a while at each other. And sometimes he'd back off, and other times he'd just, nope, he wouldn't listen to me at all. But, I understand. He's trying to protect me. You need to get down here, because you're upsetting Bob. You're a good boy, but you're upsetting Bob. Yeah, he's going to be an interesting story, too. He's not our next video, but I think he's going to be the one just after that. Next video, we're going to have Sugar. So, Bob, come on. Come on, sweetie. That's a good boy. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right, Bob. It's all right, Bob. It's okay. And you see, I'll hold his feet just a little bit to slow him down. And I'll pet him and kind of move his head down just a little bit. Watch his eyes and see where he's targeting. He just doesn't like Cecil having that toy next to my face. He's just protecting me. And again, this is why you don't want a bird mated to you, because he's in protection mode. And Cecil's pretty wild with toys. So if you think you can handle a bird that can crush a Brazil nut when it's upset in its world seeing you as either in danger or breaking the rules of relationships, I suggest you learn reward training. Take some classes if you want to work with one of these guys. Just heard of one on Facebook where they showed a picture of someone who'd been bitten in the ear, and then they were saying the bird was crazy. No, the bird's not crazy. It just doesn't belong in captivity, and no one understands the signals the bird is giving. And if you don't understand their language, how are you going to understand what they're going to do? And we see what we think is a particular behavior. Like that looks just like plain aggression. Most people would say Bob is being aggressive. And some people might think that of Cecil too, because he's banging that toy against my head. But Bob is actually protecting his territory, and I'm part of his life. In his world, I'm his mate, his permanently bonded mate. So he's not going to let anyone treat me in a way that he considers wrong. And that you just hit me on the side of the face. And Bob, I'm surprised Bob let him get away with that. But I've worked with Bob to let him know that it's okay when the other, okay, Bob, it's all right. Now, again, what I did there was just pull him back a little bit. Very funny, Bob. Very funny. No. Okay. Now, you saw that nip. He nipped me. Actually, it was my shirt, so he didn't really nip me. But he nipped as a way of telling me that he's going to take care of this situation for me. Okay? Now, here I am working with two birds that can be a little hard to deal with. I do this every day. Most of the time, they don't get aggressive because I'm not, have cameras going. Okay, so I'm able to give a little bit more of my attention directly to the birds. But let me do that right now and spend less time talking to you.
Bob versus Cecil. Slow motion replay. The tail goes up, wings out. Bob lunges forward. He strikes.
Let's see what's going on. Here, Cecil, come on. It's all right. It's all right, Cecil. Hi, Sal. Come here, Cecil. Come on. Now, it's all right, Bob. Here, Cecil. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. Go over. You guys preen. You guys preen. See that? That's a stage most people will never get to, dealing with two birds like this. I'm no genius. I took classes from Dr. Susan Friedman and learned how to read signals, learned how to deal with shaping behavior. And in this case, Bob went after Cecil. Cecil lost the toy. I let Cecil calm down for just about 20 seconds. Got Cecil back over here, put him in a situation that I've taught them to when they're face to face and I'm there. I'm holding Bob back now because I don't want him to get up on his level, on Cecil's level. That when they're face to face like that, Bob can preen. And I captured that behavior. Bob started preening Cecil. He was taught how to preen by Lorelei. He never preened before, from what I could tell. But he did that one day, and I praised him. Secondary reinforcer is praise. And there's a lot of different kinds of secondary reinforcers, but praise is one of them, so I praised him. He recognized that he was doing something I liked. And so now, in that situation, face to face, right in front of me, I can usually get them to preen. See if we can do it again. No, not with a foot. He doesn't want to do it again, but it's okay. See, that situation is pretty much diffused. Go ahead and preen. Good boy. Right near the eyes, too. That's just... That beak that could take my finger off is preening gently right next to his eye. That's just... So the prognosis for Bob in the future. If I don't find somebody who can be trained to take him when I go, he'll probably be put down. His behavior will not improve over time, being thrown from place to place again. And because people will see him as more and more aggressive, someone will eventually say he's insane, and they'll have him put down or worse. So I hope at some point someone will come along who's willing to take him, or I'd like to have at least two people who would be willing to take him, who understand the principles of reward training and can deal with the bites they're going to get in the beginning. And he's probably going to do that until he's trained out of it the way I did. But there's the groundwork. Basically, you want to present your arm. You don't want to show that any bites actually hurt you. That's hard for us to do, to hide our pain, but with him, you don't want to give him an edge. And then once he realizes that you're really there for him, then he's a wonderful bird. In the morning, he says, good morning to me. and he'll be a little upset with me. I mean, he'll kind of back away from me and not show much of it. Like he doesn't want to have anything to do with me because they have separate sleeping cages. So he'll back off and he won't want to come out if I don't say good morning to him and come over and say all that prior to taking any other birds out of the cage. But he gives me kisses at night. He'll say kisses, and he says Bob's a good boy to get my attention. If I'm walking around, like say I'm walking through the main bird room, and he's in his cage, and at that time, and he sees me going around like I don't know what I'm doing. He'll say, "What are you doing?" He's actually a lot of fun. He doesn't usually give you hugs the way other birds do. Some others do, but it's so obvious that he cares and that I'm important to him that I'm not too worried about that. You know, each bird has a different way of showing their affection. And his method of showing his affection is in protecting me and saying kisses. Can you say kisses? Kisses? Oh, good boy, that was a kiss. Another kiss. Kisses? Kisses? Bob, kisses? Kisses? Bob, kisses? Kisses? It's only one kiss. Oh, well. So, health-wise, he's potentially heading to a prolapse, and they usually don't live more than 2 years after they get a prolapse. The surgeries are not expensive, but there's 6 of them to look forward to, and a lot of extra care during the time that he's undergoing the surgeries, and it may not happen, but there's a lot of special diet that has to be maintained. If it's not, then it's almost certain to happen. So his prognosis is as long as I'm around or somebody else who's been trained to work with him, he's got a good chance of living out his life if he doesn't prolapse. But if something happens to me, I honestly don't think he'll be around for many more years after that, which is really sad because he is such a good boy. Aren't you, Bob? Well, that's our show, and I just wanted to remind everyone that you can give to us on a per episode basis by going to www.patreon.com/Chloe Sanctuary. And even $1 per episode would be wonderful. It takes a lot of time to put one of these together. If you find these valuable, you can also give us a one-time donation by going to our website and clicking on the donation tab at the top. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to discuss with us, please send an email to Chloe at chloesanctuary.org, and just be sure to put in the subject Cockatude. And you can also call us on our phone number and leave a message, and that is 760-565-BIRD, 760-565-2374. See you next time. Please visit our website at www.chloesanctuary.org. That's Chloe spelled CHLOE. You can support us on a per episode basis by visiting www.patreon.com, that's PATREON /Chloe Sanctuary.